Remind members to turn off all mobile phones as interfere with the recording, and also can members declare an interest where appropriate as we make our way through the business this morning. I've received no apologies. Just a few items in relation to the Chair's business. During the plenary on Monday, the Minister for Employment and Learning made a statement regarding the terms of reference of the joint DE and DEL review of careers. You'll recall that we wrote to the Department of Education asking for the terms of reference to be extended to cover primary school careers education and the development of a facilitation service to foster cooperation between schools and businesses. The latter was mentioned by the DEL Minister in a statement, the former was not. So I'd suggest that we write again to the Department asking about this issue and also asking that we be kept up to date on the progress of the review. Great. Some time ago, you'll be aware, members, that in March, Holy Family Primary School in Londonderry won the Under-12 Bernardo's UK and Ireland Choir of the Year. And I'm sure that you would want to join with me in congratulating them on winning the prestigious competition. You'll be aware that the principal of Holy Family is Gary Matherson, who also is the Northern Ireland chairperson of the Northern Ireland Nurture Association, and we had worked with Gary and the Nurture Association in relation to the issue of nurture. So I visited the school a couple of Fridays ago, was thoroughly impressed. The choir sang, and I thought that that would be only right that we would do something to recognise what was, for a school in the Maiden City, a very, very prestigious award to win. And so we have invited the school to come to do a very short performance in the Great Hall on Tuesday the 8th at 12:30. And if members are content for the committee to sponsor the event, we would have them here at 11:30, and we would give them some hospitality. The Speaker has said that he will also welcome them, and then they will sing in the Great Hall for about 15 minutes or so. And I think you will all be impressed by what you hear. They are very enthusiastic, and certainly something well worth seeing and well worth hearing. Great. Thank you. The draft minutes of the meeting of the 26th of March are at pages 6 to 13 of the pack. Agreed? Yeah. Just one item in relation to matters arising, the ETA inquiry. In the packs at page 16, you'll find further correspondence from the Department with regards to the Committee's inquiry into Education and Training Inspectorate and the school improvement process. I propose that we would just note the information received and include it in the inquiry report. Great. Thank you. 5 minutes ahead of schedule. We're doing well. Area planning. The Department.
Keep the pressure on.
I just keep looking towards my right. We're now going to receive a briefing on the progress, or lack of it, regarding the primary school area planning process. Probably more like the latter as opposed to the former. The primary school area planning consultation closed back in June 2013, and you recall that last week we were advised that a low report had been compiled on the feedback from the consultation on primary school area planning. The relevant revised primary school area plans have not yet been produced. So the committee agreed to seek an update on what is, for us and for many in our educational provision, a very, very important process. You recall that the Department had previously said that they would prefer not to have maybe had this today. However, the committee decided that we thought that we would still like to have the presentation. So you'll find the clerk's cover note at pages 20 to 33. Also included in your packs is the feedback from the committee's event on area planning and a copy of the Special Advisor's report on primary school area planning process and other relevant papers. The Department's briefing paper was emailed to members yesterday, and you'll find that paper in the second tabled items folder, which is the black folder, with a note from Peter. Also, in the second table paper is some information from NICE. So we're going to welcome So I suppose the paper really that you need is the one from the Department, which is the second paper. Sorry, it's the first paper. Yes, area-based planning, a summary report and the public consultation exercise. Okay. And we'll have covers. Morning, Dermot. Morning, Liam. Morning, Gavin. Can I welcome Dermot McLean, Director of Investment and Infrastructure. Please don't ask him about any capital bills. He's here to talk about area planning.
That's no longer my title. I've now taken on area planning. Philip's now taken over.
Oh, so if you just sent Philip his contact. Yes. Thank you. Rain Finlay Area Planning Policy Team, and Mr Gavin Boyd, Acting Chief Executive of the Southern Education and Library Board. You're all very welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the information that we have received to date. And Dermot or Gavin, whoever is going to lead, will take the presentation, and then members will ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the invitation to meet with the committee today to provide an update on the current position regarding the primary planning process. Firstly, Chair, I just would like to clear up any confusion there may have been regarding our attendance today. Contact was made with the Secretariat last week in order to get clarity on your expectations for the session. This appears to have led to some misunderstanding regarding our attendance today. I would like to assure you that it was never our intention to postpone or cancel attendance at today's session. Chair, as you are aware, responsibility for area planning, including producing area plans and conducting the consultation process on those plans, rests with the Education and Library Boards. In doing so, they work closely with the CCMS and the other sectors. The Department's role is to set the policy, which in this regard is the Sustainable Schools Policy, to provide advice and guidance, and then, when the plans are prepared, to scrutinise and, if necessary, challenge those plans against the terms of reference and the area planning guidance. The Education and Library Boards have undertaken the area planning process for the primary sector, drawn up the draft current plans and published them for consultation. They have analysed the responses and produced the consultation report, which you have now received. In this regard, they are best placed, along with CCMS, to provide the committee with evidence and detail around the primary consultation. As with the primary consultation process, the Central Management and Support Unit in the Southern Education and Library Board act on behalf of all the education boards and CCMS in providing a summary report on the consultation exercise. In this regard, I am very grateful to Gavin Boyd, the Acting Chief Executive of the Southern Education and Library Board, who, despite the short notice, has made himself available to attend this session today to answer any questions you might have on the consultation. Chair, given the time that has elapsed since we last met with the committee to discuss area planning, and given that there has been a number of changes on the committee, it may be helpful to give a quick synopsis of the background to area planning and the current position regarding the primary sector plans. As the committee will be aware, the Minister's statement to the Assembly in September 2011 identified effective area planning as an important process in supporting the Department's key objective of raising standards for all. The objective was to develop a network of viable and sustainable schools to enable us to provide the quality of education that our children deserve. The Minister commissioned the boards and CCMS as the bodies with the statutory responsibility for planning the school's estate, working in conjunction with all sectors with developing strategic plans to meet the needs of future education provision here. Given the statutory requirements in respect of delivering the entitlement framework, the initial work was focused on post-primary provision. The first draft post-primary plans were published for consultation from July to October 2012. These attracted over 49,000 responses. As a result of this process, revised plans were received by the Department in December 2012 for assessment against the terms of reference. Chair, this was the first time, as you are aware, that area plans had been drafted, and it was a new experience for all those involved. The Department's assessment of these plans sought to ensure that the key messages from the post-primary consultation were being addressed in the revised plans. Issues such as a consistency of application of the policy, as well as a consistent and coherent approach to the provision of information and inclusion of clear and unambiguous proposals where there was agreement. Revised plans were received in the Department in October 2013, and these are published on the Board's websites. It is recognised that these plans do not represent the final plans for all post-primary provision in any area. What they do provide is a picture of where we currently are. They outline areas where actions are planned and which can be advanced. They also highlight other areas where further work will be required to determine the most appropriate pattern of provision to meet future needs. Examples of where actions have been progressed recently include the decisions around post-primary provision in East Belfast, as well as the future shape of controlled post-primary provision in Newtownabbey Monkstown, as well as maintained provision in Armagh and Lurgan, and others are under consideration. Chair, I believe progress is being made. Before we go specifically to post-primary or to the primary plans, I thought it would be useful to highlight the extent of that progress. Between devolution in 2007 and the publication of the Sustainable Schools Policy in January 2009, the Department dealt with some 60 development proposals and approved, or 60 development proposals were brought forward and approved. 3 of those involved amalgamations. From January 2009 and the introduction of area planning in September 2011, 67 development proposals were brought forward, of which 4 concerned amalgamations. Since September 2011 in the Minister's statement to date, during which area planning has been developed and embedded, a total of 120 development proposals were brought forward and approved, and 12 of those relate to amalgamations. It is obvious the area planning process is having an impact, albeit that the area plans themselves are not as well developed as we perhaps would have hoped. This would suggest that it is the process of area planning that is important, and we should seek to strengthen that process to secure further benefits for children and young people. Chair, turning to the primary area plans, the first draft of these plans was published for consultation in March last year. The consultation period ran from the 30th of June 2013 and attracted over 11,000 responses. Gavin is available to answer any questions that you might have regarding the process and the findings of that consultation. It had originally been intended that the response to the consultation exercise and the updated primary plans would be available in the autumn of 2013. However, at a meeting of the Area Planning Steering Group with the Minister in August 2013, the Board highlighted the pressures within their system and concerns regarding their ability to meet the timeline while also advancing work on the next iteration of the post-primary plans. They sought and received agreement from the Minister to postpone the publication of the updated primary plans until the end of February 2014. At a meeting in early February 2014, the Area Planning Steering Group members highlighted and discussed the fact that the annual school consensus data, which provides the enrolment numbers for 2013-14, were due to be published at the end of February. It was agreed that it may cause confusion if the primary plans were published in February based on 2012-13 data, when a number of weeks later the 2013-14 data would be available. And in this regard, and in order to coordinate with the availability of the verifiable data and to ensure the primary plans reflected the most up-to-date information, it was agreed to move the publication of the plans to the end of April. And those plans will include the 2013-14 data. I have given you a brief timeline of the key milestones and decisions points in the primary process. While it may appear that the process has been protracted, it is a consequence of the volume of work needed in this area, as well as the pressures being faced by the boards. Most of those involved in delivering the post-primary plans are also those responsible for advancing the primary plans, and changes to the timescales were deemed to be sensible response in the circumstance. Chair, it has always been recognised that area planning would be an ongoing and iterative process, and that any necessary actions required to reshape the provision in an area should not be delayed pending the publication of area plans. Progress is being made with respect to post-primary area planning. It is acknowledged that there has been a slippage in the original timetable for the publication of the primary plans. However, this has not delayed progress in reshaping primary provision. The relevant managing authorities and the Department have continued to process proposals in the primary and post-primary sector as previously outlined. In concluding my remarks, Chair, I would state that the Board's and CCMS's role in developing area plans was always seen as an interim arrangement pending the establishment of a single planning authority. However, with the work on ESA now currently not being progressed, we still need to progress with effective area planning. In this regard, we will continue to take forward this programme with the managing authority colleagues and others. There are heavy demands on resources on all boards and CCMS at present, and I would want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the pressure that they continue to work under. Area planning is a complex, multifaceted and iterative process. We must continue to drive the process forward so that we have a network of viable and sustainable schools to help achieve our overall goals for education here. And this involves identifying future education needs and planning to meet those needs on an area basis. At this point, Chair, I'll conclude, and we will try to answer any questions that the committee might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Just in terms of a number of initial issues that come out of this, first of all, we can just clarify for us. Gavin is here as obviously as an interim chief executive of a particular board, but Gavin, will you have a responsibility to speak on behalf of all the boards, or just on the board that you are current interim chief executive?
Chair, I can only speak on behalf of the Southern Board in terms of the area planning process for the Southern Board, and I may be able to add some value around the consultation process, because the consultation process for the 5 boards was carried out by the Central Management Support Unit, which is part of the Southern Board. So the process of consultation, and I can draw on some experience I have for the Southern Board, but I can't speak on behalf of the other boards.
In terms of your comments, Darren, you use the phrases clear and unambiguous, detail and progress has been made. Now, that was in relation to post-primary. Then you cite a number of examples of where that should be seen as the case. Armagh. I don't think people would see Armagh as being a success, particularly if you're in the control sector.
Chair, I was referring to the fact that the area plans in that area identified the maintained provision, and what was in the plans identified the changes that were planned for the maintained sector in the Armagh and the Craigavon areas. Okay. Those have now been advanced through development proposal process and decisions taken on those. So, in that regard, likewise for the North Eastern, with the Monkstown and Newton Abbey proposal was flagged up in the area plan and has now been advanced.
I accept that. Lurgan, obviously the Dixon, within one sector, no agreement. East Belfast, 6 development proposals produced, only 1 was approved. So clearly not a very good example of job well done. And Fermanagh, a time bomb waiting to explode, because clearly there will be issues which will undoubtedly arise over the next number of weeks. And one of the key issues that comes out of it all is, and I just written down one word, alignment. And that is, where is the alignment? And I can't see it happening other than particular sectors deciding to do what they want to do to protect their own interests. And there's no alignment between area planning, shared education, and a desire to ensure that we maximise the benefit out of our estate, particularly also with reference to FE, because it was only last November that the Minister, after being pushed and prodded and asked and cajoled, decided to allow, along with the FE Minister, for the FE sector to be put onto the area planning steering group. And last night in this House, at 11:20, I was still here in an adjournment debate with the Dáil Minister talking about my own constituency in terms of Ballymoney. I declare an interest as a member of the Board of Governors of Ballymoney High. And that was in regards to what the shape of 14 to 19 provision would be. And you have no area planning process that is really being implemented in a way which takes all of those elements into consideration. It's all piecemeal. And how do we get that alignment?
Well, Chair, maybe if I could try to pick up on some of those points. In relation to the alignment within the department, I can give you assurance that in relation to that we work closely with our colleagues in the capital infrastructure. As you are aware, I used to hold both portfolios. And in relation to both the recent announcement on the Schools Enhancement Programme, which I was involved in establishing, and the capital announcements, there is an internal mechanism whereby the decisions and any decisions around investment are aligned and take into consideration what is in the area plans, and we would want to ensure that any capital investment takes account of what is proposed in the area plans. In relation to shared education, I mean, again, likewise, a similar process will be set up. We recently, the closing date for receipt of proposals under the Executive Shared Campuses programme closed on Monday. And again, I had a meeting with Philip yesterday to discuss how we would both align those proposals with area planning and with our own capital investment. In relation to the FE provision, there is the Department of Education and the Department of Employment and Learning have regular liaison meetings where area planning is on the agenda, and any issues around area planning in relation to the FE sector can be discussed at that level and between officials if necessary, as well as the inclusion of a representative from DEL, as you say, on the area planning steering group. And there is no doubt that in looking at any of the proposals for shared education, we want to be cognizant of how that may impact, or if there's any crossover with provision in the FE sector.
But just to conclude on this, and then we'll go to members, because I want members to have the opportunity to ask as many questions as they want to ask this morning. I'll explain to you later what all that means. There's other people getting the message there when I'm saying that. But that at a policy context all sounds fine, Dermot. But the reality, as I see it, and I think other members see it, when it comes to being implemented, it's not working. And we have a situation, and declaring interest again, I'm being very parochial, but we have a situation in Northampton whereby there are proposals on the table for the FE sector to do one particular piece of work, and will have consequences for the area learning community in Ballymena. The business case, I know, that has been developed is simply saying the best thing you do is you take that provision and you amalgamate and you put it in another location. And the minute that happens, you dismantle, you disentangle, and you create a situation where you force the three remaining elements of the learning community to come closer together. But what will happen is size will determine the outcome, because the bigger school, the bigger post-primary element, will become king of the castle, and the other two elements, one maintained, one controlled, will sort of be left flounder. And the department still hasn't agreed in terms of a joint sixth form provision. So I don't see. I've talked to the Education Minister, I've talked to the DEL Minister, I've spoken to your own selves in terms of all of these issues. Everybody says, wonderful idea. Great, and here's the policy, and it's all we can prove it all on paper. But as OECD said, we can show it all on paper, but we can't show it in practice. How do we break that cycle?
Well, obviously, I'm not in a position really to say or to discuss in relation to the FE sector, yes, and their proposals in North Antrim, but I would certainly ensure that it's at the next DEL liaison meeting we can put it on the agenda and see if what issues are arising there in relation to education provision.
Because the other thing, and then we go to Danny, the other thing is this: an organisation such as FE does a business case. Like these business cases, you know, they float around the ether. They're like development proposals. But what cross-departmental influence or discussion is had in relation to a business case? Because he who pays the piper calls the tune. So whoever it is that signs the cheque at the bottom of the company and the consultant that does the work is really beholden to that. So they're given a remit to do a specific piece of work. Does the business case become sacrosanct? Does it become the tablets of stone? Does it become, this is the only thing that you can do, because that's the narrow focus? You see all those other things, shared education, that's all very good, that's all. But your business case is about how we deliver a particular service in an area. Is that not part of the problem? And is there any correlation between any of those things?
Chair, I can only speak in relation to our own business case process, and in relation to any business case that we provide, there is a well established operating practice between ourselves and the Department of Employment and Learning, where we will not in any school seek to replicate good provision that is available within the FE sector. So certainly when we are producing, particularly at post-primary level, business cases in respect of any individual school, we will be looking closely at what is being proposed within the provision in that school. We would also take cognizance of any FE provision within the area, and we will certainly set out to ensure that within that business case we were not supporting a replication of the provision within a school that is available and perhaps to a better standard within the FE colleges. Perhaps maybe on an operational level, Gavin may be able to say something for how it operates in the Southern Board area.
Well, if it were helpful, Chair, I mean, I'm just reflecting on one case that I'm involved in at the minute, where there is a very clear commitment with both the FE sector and the post-primary sector to work together. I'm talking about the City of Armagh. Inside the city, FE in the City of Armagh has always played an important role in the education of plus 16-year-olds, 16 to 18-year-olds. Historically, a lot of sixth form provision was actually offered in the FE college, so there's a very strong linkage there. As the schools and the college in the area seek to develop joint working, a very clear role for FE is being identified in that. In practical terms, it is ensuring that the significant investment that's gone into particular aspects of FE is not replicated in schools. There's a very clear understanding in the schools in the area that there's some provision that is better offered in FE, as there's a very clear understanding that there's some provision for young people that is much better offered in schools. Now, we're at the early stages of developing that, Chair, but the logic is clear, and the excellent working relationships amongst all the partners, where there's, this is perhaps a rather crude way of putting it, but it is supportive rather than predatory. Everybody is working together to serve the interests of the wider educational community.
Okay, thank you. Danny?
Thank you. Thanks very much, and thank you very much for the presentation. I think you know where I come from on this. I think it's the most illogical policy and framework for anything that's I've seen going through the Assembly in my brief time. It doesn't seem to be putting together. Will a review take place of the process to make sure it works? And if I can go clearer into it, we had you've had the call for consistency between the boards, and yet the Northern Board is very different from the other boards and how it's doing things, and yet there's still no framework that everyone knows of how the whole system is working. And when I spoke in the chamber, I talked about the like a jigsaw, but no one knows what the picture is, and no one knows how it links to the next door, whether it's the board or schooling. And then someone else, I think, mentioned across the chamber, we haven't actually got all the pieces either. No one understands the framework when it comes to the general public. We had calls for a facilitator when we had the stakeholders up here. So are we going to review it so that we do put facilitators in place so that the schools can actually understand and be led through the process? When it comes to sharing, when you look at the report we got given late yesterday evening, you'll see the major comment from almost every board is that there's virtually, like it was sort of around 16%, 20% felt that sharing was part of it. There is nothing in it really pulling together to make sure schools start sharing, whether it's sharing across religion or sharing across the different types of schools. We've got development plans and a system that puts schools under threat before they need to be under threat, before the minister's made the decision. Are we going to review how we're carrying out the process? Are we going to look at the Scottish presumption against closure of rural schools? Are we actually going to try and do it better? So I go back to the same point. Are we going to review what we're doing? And I think, I mean, I could go on, but we know why it's got to happen. We know it was based on the viability study at the time, and yet those figures are now 2 or 3 years out of date. Are we reviewing it again in view of the viability figures to actually make sure we've got the right figures? So basically the question there is, are we going to re-look at how we're doing it so that we get it right?
Thank you, Danny. I mean, we obviously continue to review what we're doing as we go along, and part of the work of the department in challenging and the plans produced is to ensure that we try to get a consistency in relation to how the reports are produced. I would remind the committee that these arrangements were put in place as an interim arrangement pending the introduction of a single planning authority, which may have reduced any tendency to a different approach in different areas. However, we continue to move ahead with area planning. The Area Planning Steering Group guidance sets out how we will operate. And within the Area Planning Steering Group, we are looking at how we can ensure there is a consistent approach across all board areas in relation to both the production of the plans, but also in establishing local area groups where there may be a more regional focus on issues that affect those particular areas as opposed to the overall picture. I think the case in point in relation to how we dealt with the 6 development proposals coming forward for East Belfast shows that we are cognizant of cross-boundary issues where there's more than one board involved, and we do try to take those into consideration. And the Minister we have learned lessons from those development proposals coming forward at different times, and the Minister has written to the boards indicating that in future where there are groups of development proposals that may affect schools, that they should all come forward at the same time so that the full picture can be seen by all involved. In relation to your point on the viability audits, I would point out that that process, although it is not, we are not referring to it as the viability audit process, annually now, area planning profiles, which is the same information that was produced for the original viability audits, is produced on an annual basis and published by each of the boards on their websites. And that has been put in place following the initial viability audits that were undertaken a number of years ago. We are now at the 3rd iteration of that, and the next plans will be published by the boards in the coming weeks. So we are always looking at, as I say, this is a new process. We have, I think, learned from moving from the post-primary process into the primary process, and hopefully we will see a greater consistency in how the information is communicated to those involved.
Okay, and the Scottish, you looked at all the Scottish system?
I'm aware of this, but there is no indication at this stage we are not looking at adopting that approach. We obviously are dealing with a totally different situation. We are applying the Department's Sustainable Schools policy, and we're trying to do that consistently across the estate and across all schools in Northern Ireland, and that is the policy under which the Department continues to move forward with the planning process.
Okay, I'll come back after this.
Okay. Of course, the only issue then in relation to that, Dermot, is the fact that it's only 3 elements. When you come to the viability audits, you only apply 3 elements of the Sustainable Schools policy. You don't apply the 6, which created a bit of a difficulty because schools were being judged on 3 elements as opposed to the 6 elements, which is the overall context of sustainable schools. Can
maybe assure you we weren't judging the schools. Those are indicators. We are gathering the information. Those are the 3 that are quantifiable, and the information is readily available, and they are indicators of where schools may be experiencing stress at different levels. In relation to any development proposal that comes forward, we will consider any proposal against the full remit of the Sustainable Schools policy.
Sean?
Thanks, Chair, and you're very welcome, Galvin, Dermot and Lorraine. Galvin, can I go back to the point you made there about the logic is clear? I can't see how the logic is clear, particularly in terms of, you talk about Armagh Learning Partnership, I'm talking particularly about Newry and about Downpatrick Learning Partnerships. When those partnerships are doing fantastic work across the board, whether it's grammar schools, high schools, further education colleges all working together. We have great examples of education being shared. We have great examples of children who are educationally challenged. I spoke to a principal of a school last week, and 1 or 2 pupils in particular, it's the only time they have good attendance is the time when there's a link course with the local education college. So how is the logic clear when we've got area learning partnerships doing fantastic work across the board. And the fact that FE was only brought into this area planning process as an afterthought, and secondly, the funding to area learning partnerships has been cut away. That's my first question.
Well, the comments that I made, Sean, were specifically in relation to the work that's going on in the Armagh learning community, which I know well, and which is a particularly effective group. I can't comment about the other groups because I simply don't know the work they're doing. And when I said the logic was clear there, it was specifically considering some courses which are offered to 16-year-olds or 18-year-olds where there is a requirement for investment in plant. For example, construction-related courses, electrical engineering or engineering-related courses, where there has been a significant investment in the FE sector over the last number of years to make sure that they have the right kit to offer those courses, and they have the expertise to deliver those courses. And certainly within the Armagh learning community, there's a clear understanding that it would not be a good use of public funds to try and replicate those courses in schools. So there's a clear understanding that those, in fact, they're already being offered to young people in the sixth forms in the schools in Armagh, are already attending some courses in the FE college. What is particularly important is, as we develop that relationship, the timetabling, for example, allows that to work effectively, and we need to formalise it. So there is a clear logic in how each partner is going to contribute to a learning community. In other learning communities, I'm aware that, for example, schools with clear expertise in music are leading the sixth form provision for music in an area. So there's an underlying logic which is being applied locally, depending on the circumstances locally. The other point that I want to make to you is that from an operational perspective, area planning is very much an iterative process. I don't think we'll get to a position where a plan is produced and that's the plan that's going to be delivered over the next 10 years, because circumstances change. Populations move about, intakes for schools change, school budgeting change, a lot of things change. But what it does mean from an operational perspective is whenever issues arise in a locality, and I mean, I had an instance where a local representative came in to see me yesterday about a particular primary school. When we were talking about that primary school, we weren't talking about that school in isolation. We were talking about all of the other primary schools in the area. So when the board is considering a proposal from a school to increase admissions numbers, we don't just look at that individual school. We look very closely at the potential impact that there is on other schools in the catchment. It's not unusual for me now to sit down and look at maps where I was showing the home of every child who attends a particular school and other schools in the locality. So what I would say is that one of the great benefits out of this process to date has been the discipline that it has brought to decision making, and the facts that the simple fact that decisions are much more likely to be based on fact rather than anecdote.
Fair enough, Gavin. I'm not going to go on, but with respect, you didn't really answer my question.
I hope you hadn't noticed.
It is very frustrating from schools' point of view, of where they have engaged with the local further education college, and Newry is just an example, as Armagh is, or Downpatrick. They're equally good examples. But when they have engaged in this process, and the children or the young people now have found something they really want to do as well, it's preparing them for the added working life and all that type of thing as well. And to think that basically principals are saying, well, what's going to happen? We're not going to be able to engage with our further education colleges if we haven't got the funding. So children are going to be disadvantaged in that sharing of education that's taking place will not happen. The young person who talked about who's really a non-attender is not going to get this that stimulates them in the further education college. But the department is cutting the funding on.
Well, if I can just pick up the practical point again, and I agree with you. We have loads of practical experience and research that demonstrates that young people learn well when they engage with a teacher or a subject. We know this. We know that young people have different interests, and we know that some young people will engage around modern languages, other young people will engage around construction or practical experiences, other young people will engage around sport or music. So there is a key to improving performance about getting the engagement of young people, and there is what you've identified is a real challenge. If we increase the level of engagement by improving the opportunity for them to access courses that are of real interest to them and that they engage with, we will improve outcomes across the whole system. But there are challenges in that.
Chairman, you talked about the sustainable schools policy. Is the department's view that bigger is best in terms of our primary schools?
In relation to this, the work that's set out in the Sustainable Schools Policy, it does set out minimum numbers where it believes that those are the minimum numbers that provide the environment for creating the best outcomes in relation to the fact that you are dealing with single-class schools, i.e. a single teacher for each year group, and that is the basis of building up the 105 and the 140 in relation to the primary schools. Obviously, other schools can produce good results, but I mean, we need to get to a stage. The ideal situation is that you have a single teacher for every individual year group, which points to having 7 classes, 7 class-based schools.
That might be your opinion, Chairman, but that's not the opinion of all our primary school teachers. The Bain threshold, as you talk of 105 or whatever, our primary principal out say it's not a valid figure anymore. It's actually creating a lot of stress in schools. When you get you could be teaching and learning could be outstanding. Your budget, you could be a viable school, etc. There could be good leadership, etc., in the school, but you get this red thing on when you get back from the board because the school is less than 105. It's actually causing stress in schools, and particularly if something else slips a bit, then you have 2 stress factors.
We obviously have to look at this. I mean, the premise of area planning is to ensure that we have the appropriate provision to meet the needs of communities in the area, and we try to provide that through a network of viable and sustainable schools. And we have to operate obviously within the budgets that are available, and ensure that we are trying to direct the funding to the frontline services as much as possible in an effective way. Under the Sustainable Schools Policy, that is what's set out as being what we believe is the thresholds for sustainable schools.
But would you acknowledge that there are many, many good schools with less than 105 who are providing a fantastic education experience for their young people?
I don't think the department has ever said otherwise, that there are examples across the piece where there are small schools providing, smaller than those numbers, providing an excellent standard of education. The question is about the sustainability of that going forward.
Okay, but do you think do they need to maybe recognise that more and not have this figure of 105?
The department can only operate within the policy figures that are set. And those are the figures, and those are the continued figures within the Sustainable Schools Policy.
I know you'll stick up for the department and their policies anyway. On a slightly going on from that, to a different point, what is the progress in terms of area-based planning in terms of for special schools?
Following the Minister's statement last year, he tasked Claire Mangan with taking forward a review of the provision of special schools provision. We are anticipating that report, my last understanding of that is that she will shortly be submitting that report to the Minister, looking at special provision across all schools across the north of Ireland.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Trevor?
Thanks, Chairman. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
The original idea of all this was that the education library boards were charged to work with CCMS to produce plans, and you might have expected from that that meant they would work jointly. and that there would eventually, although there's been nothing so far, produce solutions or anticipated solutions which might be cross-sectoral. But is there any evidence of that in your work so far?
Well, certainly the boards and CCMS in conjunction with the other sectors are engaged in the area planning process, perhaps not unexpectedly. The first iteration deals with the most obvious areas where change is needed within each of those sectors. We certainly are aware of interaction and engagement on sharing at different levels, and part of that is manifesting itself in some of the applications that we've seen coming forward to the Executive's initiative on shared education campuses.
Yeah, you said there change is needed within sectors. I think that's what you said.
Well, there are individual schools, and we've seen some restructuring within the individual sectors, such as the 3 proposals for 3 maintained schools into 1 school in Lurgan and the 2 into 1 in Armagh. Yeah. Likewise, we've seen the proposal for 2 control schools to be combined in Newton Abbey, Monkstown.
Yeah. See, the problem I have with all this is I can't conceive of a situation where all the solutions are going to be within sectors, but that's the way it appears to be panning out. The 3 cases you've just mentioned.
Yes, those are individual sectors, but those are perhaps the easier ones to move forward with first, whereas the others may take a somewhat longer time to get agreement on what the agreed shared solution might be.
I'm looking at this is actually Peter's covering note rather than your stuff, but everything, paragraph after paragraph, says the following schools in the controlled sector, particular area, are to be subject to a local area solution. Following schools in the maintained sector, controlled sector. The one for Armagh, City and District Council area, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sorry about this, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, I think maybe 14 maintained schools are to be subject to a local area solution. Is it really the fact that the best solution in a city the size of Armagh, or district council the size of Armagh, can be restricted to particular sectors? There doesn't appear to have been any genuine attempt, I'm not particularly blaming the department, whoever produced these proposals, to recognise that perhaps the best solution is the coming together of schools, one from different sectors. It just doesn't seem to be on the radar.
If I could pick up the specific in relation to Armagh, I came into Armagh after the reports had been produced, and I've read them quite carefully. My interpretation of what appears in the published documents for post-primary and what appears in the documents that have been consulted on primary is that issues have been identified, but in most cases no particular solution has been proposed. So when it says a local area solution is to be explored, what that essentially means is there are some stress factors or some reasons why a further look should be taken at that particular issue. It doesn't preclude any particular proposition going forward. It is simply highlighting that there are issues there that have to be dealt with. And that, if you like, Trevor, is one of the early wins in an area planning process. What it does, and you can agree or disagree with some of the parameters, but when you use the parameters to test existing provision, it starts to highlight a number of issues. And the job then is to work out what one is going to do in response to those issues. Now, in relation to sharing between schools, I can tell you that in that area there is a considerable amount of sharing between schools. It's not necessarily highlighted publicly, but schools are getting on with their business, and there is a considerable amount of sharing. And in the city of Armagh, at post-primary level, there are children from each one of the post-primary schools attending courses in other post-primary schools.
Yeah, the sharing agenda is fine, and I have mixed views about it. Let's face it, because I would rather see something beyond sharing, and I promise not to use the word, so I won't. But really, it's a cloak of convenience. It hides the fact that in some situations that the real solution would be beyond just sharing. I mean, sharing a music class is fine. I'd obviously be very keen on that. But what seems to be happening is that there's a gung-ho approach to sharing, fair enough. There's rationalisation going on within sectors at the moment, in the absence of finalised plans, which might take a more realistic view across the piece. And I just keep coming back to it. I see no evidence here that CCMS and the boards cooperated in any way. I've said it before. I think they worked in different rooms to produce these plans. Tell me I'm wrong here, or point me to a case. I do know of one case, it's actually in Danny's area, where a small rural primary school has indicated its willingness to merge, perhaps, with the local maintained primary school. It refers to that in here somewhere, but doesn't even mention the second school. It just says that they're open to the option. I mean, well, and I appreciate ESA and all the delay and uncertainty around ESA may have a big effect on some of this, but sooner or later we've got to sort it out. And I can't believe when you come to do a major rationalisation of the school estate and our school systems that you can continue to work exclusively under sectoral banners. And I haven't even mentioned the integrated sector, but I have now.
Well, Trevor, I mean, the department can only deal with the development proposals that come forward, and the Minister can take a decision on those development proposals. It's up to the managing authorities to bring forward the proposals that they believe best serve the needs of their communities. And obviously, in making the decisions, they will have to take into consideration what they believe is right for their particular institutions, their particular schools, and there's always the need to ensure that we are open to the need for parental preference and take account of parental preference. I don't think it's for the department to impose solutions.
I would be delighted if the department would acknowledge that they would like to give more credence to parental preference, because if they did, they would look at a lot of surveys that have been produced in recent years and realise there is another way here. When you say the managing authorities, he's saying that the department thinks it's up to the individual schools to propose their own fate. What do you mean?
I didn't say individual schools. It's up to the managing authorities responsible for those schools operating within the framework, which is the Sustainable Schools Policy, to ensure that there's effective provision. As well, we obviously have to be sensitive to issues within local communities and in relation to the preferences of those communities in relation to the types of schools that they wish to go to. And that is sort of evidenced by the attendance and the applications to those particular schools.
Yeah, well, that's in a way that's good to hear, that you think that local opinion and parental choice and parental preference is going to be a major factor in all this. I mean, we have a survey before us today, which I haven't got to yet, around a Lucid Talk survey that's been done about Newton Abbey. You'll get to see it in due course if you haven't already. But, you know, I just think we're not in the real world here. We're not going to achieve the solutions. I mean, I know it may sound a bit radical to suggest the amalgamation of a local controlled primary and a local maintained primary. I don't mean a Moy solution with two uniforms and all that. I mean a proper, dare I use the word, integration of those two schools. I don't mean on the integrated model. I just mean the coming together has been the best solution for that particular area to make sure there's still a primary provision in that particular village. And it's not here, and it doesn't appear to be coming. This is just sectoral stuff.
I think in terms of sharing and progression towards sharing, I think we can take heart from the area learning communities, because when they were originally established, there was a lot of concern about how they would operate and, you know, would parents be happy for kids to go to other schools. And, I mean, Sean, you've just pointed out how successful that they have been. It's the same with bringing people together to develop integrated, shared, whatever you want to call it, education. You have to build the trust first. And I think there's a lot of work going on with the boards and CCMS and the other sectors to try and develop that.
Well, I'll finish, Chairman. It seemed when you mentioned the word trust, I, not for the first time, think that the public and parents of children are miles ahead of the boards, CCMS, even the Assembly, in terms of trust. You might find there's a lot more trust out there and a lot more confidence in their ability to perhaps deal with a radical solution than what there is for the various authorities to propose it. But I'll leave it at that, Chairman.
You just want one comment on this before we go?
You mentioned that it wasn't the department, it was the boards that were really going to be responsible for seeing if they could get sharing or coming together of the sectors. But is the department going to push that, or are you just letting the boards to make those choices?
Well, obviously it's up to the managing authorities to determine the best configuration. Within the guidance we do, the guidance that's been produced in relation to area planning has asked the managing authorities to consider shared arrangements where appropriate and to explore sharing arrangements in relation to provision of appropriate and effective provision in any area. In relation to, as I say, under the Executives Together Building United Community, there has been the proposal. We have now received a number of expressions of interest in relation to coming forward with infrastructure projects. In relation to sharing, there has always been a degree of sharing in local communities, and that has been funded through the Department of Education through various initiatives as well as through other programmes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Dermot, apologies for being a bit late this morning. I didn't hear what you had to say. Dermot, I've listened to all of this with interest in how we actually, arrive at what is an agreed solution. I think it's fascinating. The one thing that does concern me, though, and I'm directing this at you because I can see that there's a major issue in my own area, and that's the whole of the southeastern region. There's a democratic deficit in that board, and I'm not going into the history of it, but I'm just wondering, when you're looking at area plans, when you're actually discussing, boards are discussing what the potential future of any sector or any provision for education within an area, what consultation do they actually put in place with local elected representatives? Now, for other boards, the elected representatives are there, but in the South Eastern, there's absolutely nothing.
Jonathan, I'm not sure I'm best placed to answer what the South Eastern Board has done in relation to its consultation process on the actual area planning. Certainly, when it comes to any individual proposal that comes forward, irrespective of the area planning process, there's still a statutory process, which is the development proposal process, which is set out in statute, which means that there is a consultation with any individual institutions that are going to face significant change, any individual schools. There's a pre-publication period of consultation which the board must undertake with the stakeholders, and then post-publication there's a 2-month period following publication when anyone who wishes to comment or put in suggestions in relation to that development proposal process can do so. Those are all gathered together and considered when making any final decision, or recommendations are put to the Minister and he makes the final decision. Yeah. But in relation to what the South East has done specifically in relation to area planning, I'm not sure that I'm sort of best placed to answer that.
I know you may not be, but I'm just putting it out here because there is a major issue here, and I've seen a lot of stuff put out there around the formal process, and ultimately a lot of it has been backtracked on. And if there had been a political input into the process in the first place, I don't think half of them would have been there. So it's just something to take note of. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Can I just, before we move on from that point, Dermot, this issue that Trevor raised in relation to who's in control of the process? Because I don't think the Minister or the Department's in control of the process. I think it's not an area plan, it's a wing and a prayer. And there's a hope that somebody's going to come up with a solution. Because clearly, like, you know, and Trevor made reference to, and for members it's page 30, 31 through, they're just a list of schools. Just lists of them. Like one area in particular, I counted there 11 schools in Down. And you get, you know, and all you get is the local area solutions. But what are they? In my own area, the area plan said local area solutions. There's some of the schools, when they saw it, they went, what does that mean? You know, but what they have is a policy, and the department says, now, if you're under 105, you're up for closure. Then there was CCMS saying, oh no, it's not 105, it's at your 84. Because CCMS doesn't buy into the 7-school model that the department wants. They buy into a 4-teacher school model, which is the 84. They work on parish. The rest works on area plans. Like, and the comment you made earlier, that the department won't impose solutions. The department pays the bills for every one of these schools. The department is the paymaster general for every school. But yet they do not have the control over the long-term composition of the estate. And in fact, what is happening? The department's held to ransom by all of these elements of the system. Now, I know, Minister, or you could turn around to me and say, well, you see, if we had ISA, that would solve it all. Right? We've had that for 7 years. When are we going to have a situation? I have to say, I have and continue to have serious issue with the control sector. Left, top of a wing and a prayer, that's left out in the cold. Because there's nobody in there defending it, nobody in there shouting for it. Comes to area planning, they haven't the ace card. They can't say, oh, by the way, see when it comes to closing our school, you know, there's the title deeds. We can't do anything with our school because we hold the title deeds. When are we going to move away from that, Dermot?
Chair, maybe just pick up on a couple of points. Firstly, the figure of 105 and under sustainable schools is not, if you fall under that, means that you're not earmarked for closure. It is a trigger where a review should take place. In relation to moving forward with area planning, obviously the Minister, in doing so, and the Department of Education in taking that forward, must operate within the legislation that is currently in existence. Within that legislation, there are rights and responsibilities set out for the various sectors and how they need to be dealt with. So therefore, area planning is being taken forward within the existing legislation and within with the rights and responsibilities that are set out in that legislation. In relation to the area plans where it indicates that there is an area solution required, that is obviously an indication that at this stage they have not reached a conclusion as to what that area solution will be, and it comes back to the point that Gavin made, that this is an iterative process. We are not expecting to have some sort of master plan that deals with every school at this particular time. We're expecting plans that highlight those where there is clarity now and which can be moved forward, but also in indicating that an area solution may be required, there is still further work to be done, and that a future version of the plan will, when updated, will then reflect any consensus or changes to those plans that may be required in the future. Having said that, and going back to one of the points made at the beginning in relation to alignment of capital investment and capital, it is only in the situations where there is clarity as to what the solution will be that the department would feel confident in relation to significant investment in new schools where there is clarity on what that solution is. So until some of those issues get resolved, those areas where there is uncertainty, are, it would be very difficult to see a situation where there would be any new investment in relation to new bills until we know what the final pattern of provision will be in those areas.
Chair, can I just make a point? I'll make this point only in relation to the Southern Board, because I have to just not disagree with some of your comments, but just for the record say that in the Southern Board, the Board takes very, very seriously its managing authority responsibility for control schools. There is a subcommittee of the Board, the Control Schools Subcommittee, which is made up of elected members and transferers, which takes those responsibilities very seriously. And it is not the approach in the Southern Board to do anything other than try to fully engage with all local representatives, very local representatives, and the school authorities in the area planning process.
From your understanding, Gavin, is that the only board that has that provision?
Sorry, Chair. I don't know. I could easily check out, but I can only comment in relation to the Southern Board. Those responsibilities are taken very, very seriously.
Trevor, you wanted one comment, and then we go to Rob.
Just on the back of your pointing out again that what does local area solutions mean? Because as I scroll down, as I say, there's a local area solution proposed, for instance, for Gordy Integrated near Strabane, I think it is. And there's a local solution proposed for Portaferry and Ansborough primary schools. What does that mean if it's not in conjunction with an overall local area solution involving maintained and controlled? How can you have a local area solution for one school? Can we come back to this? What does this actually mean?
Well, Trevor, with 800-odd primary schools, I'm sure you'll not be surprised that I may not know the detail around those particular schools, but obviously that would obviously have to take into consideration, and I'm assuming that they are looking at the full range of options that may be available, and particularly in rural areas where there is different provision that may be under those levels. They may be looking at other solutions that would ensure some sort of sustainable provision to ensure adequate education provision going forward into the future.
See, I'm slightly guessing as to where Gorty Integrated Primary is, but I think it's between Derry and Strabane. There's a local area solution for the controlled schools in Strabane District Council, which involves the closure of Bridge Hill Primary School. I think it's already happened. There's one for the maintained schools, if I can find it here. Yeah, which CCMS to consult on the amalgamation of Barrack Street Boys and St Anne's Primary School, Strabane. St Mary's Boys and St Mary's Girls are to amalgamate, and CCMS is to consult on the closure of Enva Primary School and St Francis of Assisi. And then below that it says local area solutions are proposed for the integrated schools. Gordy. Is there any overlap here?
I don't know that particular case, and I think that those may be questions that would be best addressed to the Western Board and CCMS. However, one of the things you would have to take into consideration, obviously, particularly in relation to primary provision, is the proximity of other schools within an area to and the travel times that are required for primary school children. So without having a map or seeing what's on that map, I don't think I really can...
Sorry, Chairman, I don't mean to put you on the spot about a particular case. I'm just using it as an example that it's joined up thinking, and there's not much evidence of it here.
Sorry, Chair, would you mind awfully if I'm sorry, I'd like to take the opportunity to make a comment in relation to the Southern Board, because members might find it helpful. I can think of one rural area where we have 4 controlled primary schools, each one of which is less than 105 pupils, but each one of which provides good quality, at least good quality education, manages budget very carefully. The policy has identified that we should look at it very carefully, but actually having looked at it, and despite the fact that they would indicate a stress factor in terms of numbers, the local solution is to leave those schools as they are because they're all working very effectively.
Do you expect me to disagree with that?
Well, I'm just saying that
I'm not talking about the ones where they're clearly viable and where they satisfy the criteria. I'm talking about the ones where the opposite is the case, and what's the solution. And the solution, I'm sorry, Chairman, about this, but the solution appears to be initially to not bite the bullet, but enter some kind of sharing arrangement. And the solution which nobody appears to want to contemplate is amalgamation. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Chair. I think my concerns, I'd indicated to speak before the Deputy Chair spoke, and my concerns are very much along the same lines as his. But I think, sorry, welcome to the committee as well. Can I just say, in terms of the Deputy Chair made the comment about, Dermot made the comment back to the Deputy Chair that area planning was to be a temporary solution in the light of it. But an interim solution, I think, is what you'd said. But, I mean, even interim solutions do need to have very professional bases to them. And it just seems that, you know, the more, and I'm a fairly recent member to the Education Committee, the more that you see of it, you don't get the impression that there is this professional base to what's happening. And Gavin and I have had our disagreements around the East Belfast area. And indeed, the chairman referred to the East Belfast situation earlier. Part of the East Belfast situation, in East Belfast, and indeed the Southern Board, and again, Gavin's valiant attempts to defend the actions of the Southern Board, but it does lack political credibility. And until the commissioners are replaced by a proper structure of a board, then that credibility will continue to be missing. In terms of, the chairman indicated, you know, he apologised for being parochial. I'm not going to apologise for being parochial in the East Belfast situation. Can I maybe just ask you to outline to me Avoneel and Elmgrove, that situation, which is a significant situation for the Inner East situation. Where are we with the Newton Breda and Knockbreda situation? And again, the chairman made reference to the Dale scenario in this area. I've had, I think it's probably 4 meetings now with representatives of BMC and the development of the and replacement of the Montgomery Road site, and indeed a whole new ethos in education perhaps emerging from that site. New curriculums and new qualifications and new structures and so on. Where is that joined upness in the East Belfast area plan?
Well, thank you, Robin. Maybe if I pick up on some of those points, and the first one, maybe I would like to be clear. Apologise if I wasn't clear at the beginning. Area planning is not an interim solution. The Minister has announced that we are moving forward with area planning. The interim arrangements for discharging area planning was that we would continue to work with the 5 education and library boards, CCMS and the Managing Authority, pending the establishment of a single planning authority, which was to be the Education and Skills Authority. That is now in abeyance. We will continue with area planning, and the outworkings of the area planning will be discharged with the bodies that are currently in place. So the area planning itself is not an interim process, it is a set and ongoing process. Picking up on some of the other points, I'm not sure that I can actually give you much clarity in relation to specific proposals in the Belfast board area in relation to Avoneel and Elmgrove. All I can tell you is that we are aware the board is looking at the pattern of provision in that area, but at this stage there is no development proposal published in relation to Avoneel and Elmgrove primary schools. On the Newton Breda and Knockbreda, you will be aware that there was a development proposal published. The Minister has considered those development proposals and has approved the development proposal for the establishment of a new school, which will see the 2 schools come together. In relation to the FE provision, obviously I'm not totally familiar with the Montgomery Road site in East Belfast, but as I say, we do have are regular liaison meetings between ourselves and colleagues in the Department of Employment and Learning, and my Minister meets with the Minister for Employment and Learning, and on that agenda will be, if necessary, and there are issues, area planning issues, will be on that agenda for consideration. If either party believes that there are issues in a particular area that need to be raised and considered on a cross-departmental level.
Can I just say, Chair, it surprises me, your final comments, in the sense that BMC are actually actively out meeting local representatives.
Sorry, it's an FE college.
Yes.
I'm not aware.
It has implications for, I mean...
But we, as I say, on the Area Planning Steering Group, we have a representative from the Department of Employment and Learning on the Area Planning Steering Group. And if there are specific issues in relation to the plans coming forward in that area, you know, that can be flagged up. I'm not aware of particular issues in relation to that particular provision.
See, within, I suppose, half a mile of that proposed new college, proposed maybe too strong a word, isn't it? You have the Knockbreda site. I would have thought that it had immediate implications. I would have thought.
I mean, there is, as I say, a long-standing arrangement or agreement between the Department of Employment and Learning and the Department of Education that we will not replicate good FE provision within our schools, and likewise that any proposals around FE provision are not aimed at replicating what is available in local schools in the area.
I'll just leave it like that, Chair.
Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. Can I apologise for missing your briefing? So some of my points may already have been covered. I've said it many times, the creation of self-fulfilling prophecies is something the department should take every effort to avoid, and I honestly don't think enough consideration has been given to this. Sean made some very, very good points in his question about rural, and in the consultation report, Appendix 6, it says the definition of rural as applied to the area-based planning is viewed as inherently discriminatory, and as it is with the 105 threshold that you have touched on, as it applies equally to schools in cities and towns such as Lisburn, Portadown, Newry, and to schools in isolated areas with small populations. How do you respond to those concerns? Now, you may already have in the introduction, but could you maybe further elaborate? Sean, your time is perfect. I've just been praising you for your questioning.
Thank you, Joanne. I mean, all I can say is that the department continues to operate within this sustainable schools policy, which has been set. The definitions are contained within that. The Minister has made it clear to the Area Planning Steering Group, based on discussions, that there are no plans at this stage to revise the sustainable schools policy. So those definitions are what we continue to operate within. Definitions of rural. In relation to the 105, as I said previously, the 105 is a trigger. It doesn't mean to say that it's a trigger for looking at the sustainability of that school. And as Gavin has said previously, you have to look at each individual circumstance, and you have to consider what alternatives are available. And so there's no set criteria that says just because you're under 105 that you will definitely close. I mean, the Minister has recognised that there will be need for strategically important provision to be maintained, and that may be below that 105 figure.
I'm aware of that, and as Gavin knows, he has a misfortune of covering my constituency, and I do sometimes appear to have him on speed dial. But some of the respondents' questions whether or not the policy had been rural-proofed. In your view, has it been?
Yeah.
The sustainable schools policy was rural-proofed.
It has been?
Yes, the sustainable schools policy has been rural-proofed.
Okay.
And it was at the time that it was created.
don't think it's been waterproofed enough, but anyway. Another point, as Gavin knows well, in my own area, area plan can throw up very controversial proposals, but in the SALB's response to the committee's letter last month, you told us that the projected increase in the total primary and, in your words, projected increase in total primary and post-primary enrolment in the years up to 2025 is significantly greater in the SALB area than in other board areas. Can you put numbers to this significantly? How many are we talking about?
Those are figures, Joanne, I wouldn't have before me, but certainly the figures that are produced within the area plans are based on the figures provided by colleagues in NISRA, the Northern Ireland Statistical Research Agency, and they produce figures through to 2025, broken down by both board area and council area, and those are the figures that are used within the area plans.
Can we get those figures in?
Those are available within the published plans, but certainly we can provide the information provided to us by the statisticians.
If I can make a quick comment, certainly information is publicly available. I've just flicked to some primary information, if it's helpful. The primary population in the Southern Board area is projected to rise from just under 40,000 to 45,500 over that period. So those are very significant increases. But I need to warn you the fact that they're not evenly distributed. There are some parts of the Southern Board where the population has increased very rapidly, particularly around Dungannon and Lurgan for reasons that you'd appreciate. The comments that you made in relation to the 105, the rural schools number, came out very strongly in the Southern Board consultation exercise, and the Southern Board is a good example of an area where we have both significant towns, like Banbridge and Lurgan and Portadown, but most of our schools are in rural areas. Yeah. So we've got a very high number of small rural primary schools. The point that I really want to make is that although the indicator is there, it is just an indicator, and the board will look at all aspects of the policy. And I can think of one very isolated primary school with 34 pupils, but it ticks every other box, and including supporting what is quite an isolated community. So the fact that it is 34 pupils is something we look at very carefully, but actually it doesn't mean in any way, shape or form that that school is earmarked for closure.
And you know, Gavin, I've spoken to you many times about this and the fear and uncertainty, and will continue to do many more, I'm certain. So how will you ensure that the area planning solutions, including resulting development proposals, will take into account this projection by 2025? Are you confident then?
Any development proposal that's published, we will use the most up-to-date information in relation to statistical information. I would sort of caution, relying on projections through to 2025 as being entirely, accurate down to the last person. There is obviously a degree of projection in those statistics through to 2025, hence why the statistics are updated, I think, on every 2 years. So NISRA will update those statistics every 2 years and take into account any changing factors, migration, immigration, etc., that may have, or other factors that may be influencing the statistics. But in relation to any individual development proposal that comes forward, we will use the most up-to-date statistical information at both the board, council, and as far as we can get it down to each individual area basis, based on that information both in relation to primary and post-primary schools.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Tommy?
I had two small questions, Chairman. I think I failed to welcome you at the beginning, so apologies for that. But when we're looking at the Northern Board, and I support both of them, but I wanted to know a little bit more detail of what you saw as meant by the shared solution, and particularly we've got Money Nick working with its shared solution. Yeah, and at the same time we're looking at a shared solution for Crumlin. And I'm just intrigued. I know we've got difficulties when it comes to Crumlin as to how we work out ownership and things with the sharing. How do you see the framework of a shared school working? And also in the same part of their paper was the federation idea. Just, it wants to be a little bit clearer on what they both meant.
I'm aware that there is a proposal or consideration been given to a solution for Moneynick and Dunedin. I don't know the details of that, Danny, so I'm not in a position to actually have a discussion around what's actually contained within that proposal. In relation to Crumlin, there are ongoing discussions between the managing authorities, as you are aware, between the board and CCMS as to how they might come forward and in relation with the integrated sector and what a solution might be for Crumlin. In considering that, they obviously have to factor in how that ties in with provision in the surrounding areas. And again, the people who manage and operate those schools are in a better position to look at the potential solutions. So therefore, I don't think it's for me to comment on what I believe is the appropriate pattern for provision in Crumlin.
The reason I was raising it was on the technical side. It was just, it looks like one of the blockages for what's happening in Crumlin, and I just wondered, had we found a solution to it at Moneynick? And I mean, obviously, I'm for both, but you don't need to answer, because I know
the issue in relation to ownership, I don't believe is really an issue. I mean, in relation to what we're doing down in Lissanelli, that we are looking at the arrangements, and we've had discussions in other areas about how we may come. That there will obviously have to be solutions to the ownership issue, but I would stress that for the Department of Education or to put any investment in, we take a charge over any piece of land on which education facilities are placed, and that charge stays on that land for as long as those facilities are delivering education provision, and that there is within the operating procedures within the department a sliding scale against which, depending if it ceased to be an education provision, there is a clawback arrangement depending on how long it has been since the last capital investment has gone in. So there are mechanisms that are in place to protect any capital investment in education facilities.
Okay, thank you. It was very useful. And the other query I had was, we've got the consultation, we've got a good summary of the consultations today, but there's still a hint, and I go back to my very beginning, that there's no review going to happen. I mean, the whole point of the consultation was to listen to everybody and fine-tune area planning. Are we going to take on the consultation points, and are we going to then review in line? Otherwise, why are we consulting?
Sorry, just to clarify, the reports as they are produced are consulted upon, and the consultation is clearly taken into account in moving on to the next stage of.
So they really are going to take all those points that we've got, the long lists of percentages. And
well, the reason for doing the consultation was to find out what people thought and to analyse those comments. And Joanna's made a comment about what are some of the very strong points that came out. But again, I would repeat that this is, from my perspective as an operational manager, this is an iterative process.
So you will take them on board?
They'll be taken on board, and the plans will be updated probably on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you.
Cameron, will you put us all out of despair? Because Trevor and I would like you to give us a definition of iterative.
Can I come back in writing?
No, we'll just ask you now, because you've used it several times.
What I mean by this is that from a manager perspective, I don't regard these area plans as being set in stone today forevermore, because circumstances change. Joanne made reference to population changes, for example. That changes circumstances. Funding of schools change. Numbers of people going to schools change. They change over time. Communities change their views on provision. So I actually see them as being living documents that are updated regularly with new facts. And new facts, when every time you get new facts, you can change your position on something because it's the right thing to do. That's the way. So that's my long-winded definition of iterative.
I would concur with that. We have had discussions at the Area Planning Steering Group as to how often should the plans be revisited for publication, as opposed to being revisited on an ongoing basis as part of the planning process within each of the managing authorities. And in relation to Gavin saying that demographics and factors change within communities, in relation to the current drafts, there are those, as has been highlighted before, where it is indicated that an area solution is required. As those are clarified and updated, we would want to see the area plans updated to reflect those decisions that are taken where there is now where clarity and agreement has been reached on what those area solutions might be. So hence we would see the plans being revisited and updated on a regular basis. Now, as to what regular is, we have to strike a balance between the effort that's required to keep this ongoing and produce these plans and actually getting it delivered on the ground.
Take in FE, Chair.
And that clearly does have to take in
Yeah.
the all changing circumstances, including the input of FE, which is a very important partner in this enterprise.
Yeah, just on the iterative thing, I mean, I understand now where you're coming from. I wonder when this process will stop being iterative or fluid and become definitive or prescriptive. I mean, when will decisions be made?
Again, from a Dermot talk about the policy perspective, but from a management perspective, it never changes. Sorry, it never stops because it's a journey rather than an end. Things are always being updated by the circumstances as they change.
It could be iterative.
Sorry?
It could be termed as iterative.
You're beginning to lose me now. I think we'll draw a conclusion to this. One last question in terms of, have we therefore any idea of a timescale as to when this current set of proposals in terms of plans would be out for public gaze, more than what we currently have at this moment in time?
The primary plans?
Yes.
We are still aiming to have the primary plans in with us in April, and we would, as soon as we have looked at them and against the guidelines and the guidance that was provided at the time, we would be still aiming to have the boards publish those on their website in the next matter of months, hopefully by the end of April and certainly into early May.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Lorraine, Galvin, as again, always, thanks for your help, thanks for your cooperation.
Thank you.
Look forward to continue to work with you. Thank you. And just a couple of things in terms of tidying this up. We're due to receive a briefing from the Special Advisor, Tony Gallagher, on primary area plans next week. Are members content that we to postpone that briefing until the area plans have been published by the department? There's no point in bringing Tony. Okay. And also forward to Professor Gallagher the correspondence from the ELB on the financial viability of schools. Okay. We'd also planned to undertake a final area planning event in June. Remember, we're going to take some of the people from Scotland over, but in the absence of the plans and any clarity in respect of the completion, are we content to postpone that until maybe in September time? We may possibly have more information. Okay. Okay, the clerk has also asked me to advise members that he understands that the Northern Ireland Audit Office is to begin a review of area planning in the autumn. It's suggested, and that'll be interesting, it's suggested that we have our event maybe in September, produce a short report if appropriate at the time, and then defer further consideration of the issue until the Public Accounts Committee has concluded its work, which might not be until the end of the mandate.
Chairman, if the Audit Office starts to review this process, they'll have to bear in mind that it's an iterative process, and they'll probably have to revisit it every year until infinity comes along.
Well, I have to say, I think that's a valid point to make, and we should, we shouldn't lose sight of that. Don't ask me to spell iterative. Yes. Yes, I think we should. Yes, write to the boards and ask them if they have a controlled subgroup in each of their education library board areas, because it seems as though there's only one board that has it. Okay. Thank you. Okay, members, Learning to Learn, the Early Years Fund, move on quickly, and we have a presentation. You'll find the clerk's covered on pages 80 to 87 along with supporting documentations, and in tabled items you'll find information on the Bright Start. This is the first action of the UFM-DFM childcare strategy and refers to the provision for school-aged children. And can I welcome to committee this morning Linda Wilson, Director of Family and Communities, Cathy Galway, Head of Early Years and Learning to Learn Team, Alison McGaw, Early Years Team, and Bridge Little, ETI Early Years Inspectorate. You're very welcome. Thank you for taking the time to come to us this morning. And Linda, if you want to make your opening comments, and then members will have questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. in relation to Learning to Learn, as you'll see from the briefing paper we provided, we've begun to progress a number of the actions. The Learning to Learn framework provides clarity about what early education and learning services are, and also provides an important platform for improving and enhancing cooperation across key departments and agencies delivering early years services. The framework has generally been positively received, with many practitioners expressing satisfaction with the strategic objectives and aims and the principles which underpin the actions. It provides a clear context for early years education and learning services and clarifies the contribution early years provision makes to education and wider executive aims. It also crucially highlights the importance of early years services and practitioners working together and with families to secure improved outcomes for all our children. Issues with the preschool admissions process and the need to meet the programme for government commitment remain key concerns for the Minister, and we're seeking to implement aspects of Learning to Learn which impact directly upon this. In relation to the Early Years Fund, by way of background, the fund was originally created by DHS SPS to help sustain certain childhood services in areas of greatest need following the ending of Peace 2 funding. It was subsequently transferred to DE, along with the transfer of certain early years policies in 2006. DE has continued the arrangement established by DHS SPS, and the fund is administered on DE's behalf under service level agreement by Early Years, the organisation for young children. In 2013-14, the fund value was around £2.6 million. Over 200 posts in 159 groups, a mix of playgroups, early years centres and creches, were supported by the fund. You've had sight of a report on the fund carried out by the DFP Business Consultancy Service. The report highlighted a range of issues about the fund, a number of which have been addressed. In terms of the actual operation of the fund, some management and administration arrangements of concern were identified, and EYO was asked to address these with urgency. The Department has received assurance that this has been done. At a strategic level, the report also raised issues about the fund. As the Minister has indicated, the review findings will form part of his consideration of the way forward for the fund. To that end, the Minister is currently considering options which will take account of the issues raised in the DFP report, including the allocation to a closed cohort of applicant groups. In addition, consideration will be taken of departmental priorities, including Learning to Learn and the overall budgetary position. So, thank you.
Sorry, a quick change around here at the top end, and I wasn't in the room when you began, so apologies for that, but thank you very much indeed. Well, I sort of gather my thoughts. I'm going to start with Joanne's question, if I may. Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank you for your presentation? Just on the issue of preschool education advisory groups, I have been approached by community groups who want to see preschool places increased in their area, because not to do so means that parents are travelling with their children to places outside their community. What consideration is given by the advisory groups to preschool places being provided in a community where demand exists, but places are being denied because of it could create, we are told, displacement elsewhere? Is this, in your opinion, really the way to do this in the long term?
The preschool advisory groups play a key role in managing the preschool programme on behalf of the boards and the departments, and are particularly important because of their local knowledge. The issue for the department is around placing every child whose parent wants a place. The actual location of those places is looked after by the PIGs, and we would expect those places to be identified within a reasonable travelling distance. We don't have a particular definition of that, because we recognise it can vary significantly depending on where places are located. The new providers are brought into the programme in response to need in the area, and that really is a matter for the PIGs. We can't say, it's not something we control directly.
But you do realise the problem you're on with, places being offered well outside the area and the frustrations that this creates to the community?
Yes, I mean, that's a matter that we would raise with the boards in terms of finding places, and indeed we are trying to look at reasons why parents, for example, don't continue with the process between stage 1 and stage 2, to help us understand why that is, so that we can.
Many times, Linda, when you've been before the committee, the amount of parents that seem to drop off the radar, their sheer frustration in the fact they're not being followed up to find out why they didn't complete.
Yes, and we've done some work on that over the past number of months to try to understand why parents do fall out of the process.
Okay, there were 332 responses to the consultation in 2012. Are you aware of this issue about early years provision remaining within the rural community raised by respondents? This is a big issue that, particularly in rural areas, they want the provision within the rural community.
Can I just clear responses to what? Which document?
Your consultation in 2012.
Learning to learn.
On learning to learn. Yes, some respondents did raise the issue of how we prioritise, how the admissions process prioritises children. Some people wanted to see the admissions process prioritise local children. So whenever they apply for a place, that local children would be given a priority. That was raised. The issues around access to rural provision were raised, not so much in that they wanted a setting in every community, but they wanted, as you say, a reasonable travelling distance. So it did come up, but it is dealt with by the PEGs in terms of what they look at and the need and the capacity and the demand in the area, but also in displacing other provision where you could actually then displace a whole 24 provision to put 8 in somewhere else. So it is a balance between local providers at a very local level and being able to ensure that you have enough capacity for the children, or the entire population of children, the whole cohort. So it was raised, the PEG are looking at it, and it is something that we will look at when we get into doing an admissions code for preschool as part of the review of the preschool admissions process about how priority is given in admissions criteria. Now, the schools and boards of governors are responsible for setting their own admissions criteria, so in many cases the schools will set criteria that the children have to be from the local community or from the parish or whatever. So in some schools it already is in place, and when we're looking at the admissions code, it is something that we intend to look at.
I can ask another question. The Minister has confirmed in a written answer that the Learning to Learn framework includes an action to introduce temporary flexibility in class size for nursery schools and nursery units, up to a maximum class size of 30 in certain circumstances. What circumstances would you say this allowed? Would this be allowed? Can you outline those?
Yes, indeed. This is one of the actions in Learning to Learn that we're implementing this year. I should say it's on a pilot basis. We'll be looking at how it works in practice, but following recommendations from the PEGs, we've put an additional 77 places into the statutory sector already this year. Cathy, you might like to.
Yes, the circumstances are where the school can accommodate the extra 4 children per class, up to 4 children, where the school is oversubscribed with target age children, applications from target age children, and where the accommodation can safely accommodate them, the school can apply to the Preschool Education Advisory Group in their board area. The Preschool Education Advisory Group then make a recommendation to the department on whether that capacity is required, because they'll look at the overall demand and the places in the area, and if there's insufficient places and the school can accommodate it and are willing to take the extra children, then they'll make a recommendation to the department. And so far we've, as Linda said, we've put an extra 77 places into the system this year.
So who, Cathy, makes the decision to allow temporary flexibility in these
Ultimately, it's the department. The department has the role to determine the enrolment number for schools. So it is ultimately the department, but we will rely heavily on the recommendation of the PEG, because they are there at the local level and they know all the demand and capacity issues. So it's not a case of a school saying, I can take extra children and I'm oversubscribed, therefore I want these places. It's about looking at the programme for government commitment to see, do we need these extra places, and if we need them, then yes, we will approve that, and so far we have approved them, and we have gone on the basis of the PEG recommendation. So where there's an obvious need and the children can't be accommodated anywhere else, then we will approve it. But in some cases a parent will state, several preferences, and those preferences are able to be accommodated. There are free places elsewhere, so where the preferences can be accommodated elsewhere, then we wouldn't.
I know some groups would be interested to know that temporary flexibility is possible. Is allowing this flexibility then a common occurrence?
Well, it's only been introduced as a result of Learning to Learn, so this is the first year for the for this September's admissions process.
It being then?
Well, we would envisage, well, depending on how successful it is, we would envisage it, we will evaluate it and look and see how successful it's been this year. And yes, we would intend to implement flexibility, but it's for statutory providers only. So it's only for nursery schools and nursery units. The numbers are capped for voluntary providers, and it's not by the Department. The Department of Health sets the numbers for voluntary and private providers.
Yes, and just for clarification, the approval is just for 1 year only, because it's looking at the overall pressures for 1 year, so it'll be a fresh start every year.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Apologies for having to step out there. So something else just to pay attention to. Danny?
Lovely. Thank you. And trying to get me in my normal seat now. Have we actually done the changes in the regulations relating to the 4-year-olds and the July and August birthdays? Because that was have those happened? I mean, processed through the system.
The 4-year-olds and the July and August birthdays, yes, that's regulations. So that was brought in, I think, for the current year.
Yes.
So everyone knows about it and it's all
Yes.
through.
Yes.
Okay, no, it was also, just when reading through our brief, when it came to Sure Start, I was intrigued to see that the Minister was increasing to 25%, but he was actually using the super output areas as a measurement, and we've had a lot of debate in the committee about alternatives to free school meals as a measurement when it comes to funding. Have super output areas proved a good way to judge things?
I think they're a way of targeting, and that's part of the rollout of Sure Start. It was the 20% most disadvantaged areas. The first part of the rollout is the top 25 most disadvantaged and super output areas. So it's a sort of slightly less than just the top 25 most disadvantaged areas. It's a targeting issue. Where we go after that, will depend on the outcome of the review of Sure Start that's being commissioned as part of Learning to Learn.
Okay, thank you. That would be for the moment.
Okay. Sean?
Thanks, Chair. And ladies, you're very welcome. I suppose the first point really is in line with every school a good school. I know the Department's developing protocols to deal with intervention protocols. Are these protocols going to be somewhat similar to what we have as formal intervention? And will it apply to the statutory and to the non-statutory sectors?
Well, at the moment, every school a good school applies to the statutory sectors. Nursery schools and nursery units are captured by that policy and that process. The voluntary and community sector are not, although they're inspected in the same way, follow the same curriculum and inspected in the same way by our colleagues in the inspectorate. So that seemed to us to be an anomaly. And what we will be looking at is to how we can extend the principles of every school a good school to voluntary and community sector providers, while recognising their very different and unique circumstances, because clearly it's not just as simple as rolling it out. I don't know, would you like to comment on that, Grace?
You're very right, Linda, that we do look at all preschool education under the use of the preschool curricular guidance document, and to that end we're always looking to raise standards for all of the children. It is important that I think that we do acknowledge that the good practice that already exists in the voluntary and private sector, and we have been working for a number of years now to try and ensure that we work as a whole sector as opposed to separate out, etc. To that end, at the moment we have a pilot, an SEN pilot running out that covers both the statutory and the voluntary providers, looking at the needs of all of the children within the sector. So we're very keen to ensure that whatever quality provision it is, that it goes right across the sector and it isn't significant for one rather than the other.
And then, if we take that on further in terms of, for example, attendance in the primary school and post-primary, there's a necessity to have good attendance and so on. Are there any plans to roll other parts of every school a good school into the preschool environment?
Not at the moment, in the same way as we're looking at the issues around support for schools or settings that need support, because we are conscious that at the moment that if a school has a report which is less than satisfactory, there are measures to help it improve, whereas that's more ad hoc on the voluntary community sector. So we've picked that particular aspect of it as being something that we want to replicate in Learning to Learn, but we're not trying to just sort of make voluntary communities sectors fit. But it's not one size fits all. As I say, it's about applying the principles.
Could I just add to that? It really is about the support, because every school, a good school, is about supporting schools to reach a certain standard of quality. And at the moment, what we're trying to focus on is what supports they will need. But eventually, even if they get the supports, if they can't come up to the level of quality that we would expect, there will be decisions that may have to be taken about them remaining within the programme. So in terms of a formal intervention, not in the same way as schools, the intervention might be that we go in with support, and then if we can't bring the quality up with support, that at some point we'll have to ask ourselves, do we still want that provider in the programme if they're not meeting a quality standard?
Okay. Why have the early years support clusters not been set up yet?
We need to look at where we set them up. We said initially in Learning to Learn that we would put 2 in each board area. We've had some feedback from colleagues in the boards and from nursery school principals that 2 in each board area might not be enough, that putting them in localities might not be enough, and there might be a different method of setting up these clusters. We need to engage. I think we need more engagement around what those clusters would look like with nursery school principals and with boards and with other settings. So we're in the process of trying to define what those clusters would be, what services they would be providing, what the lead cluster role would be, and we're still engaging with stakeholders around that, because we don't want to design it and then force it on the sectors. We want the sectors to help us to inform that. So we did say in Learning to Learn that we would be engaging with them first, and we just have to we're getting around to it. So we are working on it, but they haven't been set up yet.
And how far, considering it was December 2012, this idea was first mooted, how far down the road are we?
Well, December 2012 was when it was launched for consultation. It was actually October 2013 when Learning to Learn was published in its final form. So we're actually only 6 months into Learning to Learn.
Okay, the next one then is in Irish language. Early years organisation Altram will be losing its funding from June, and as a result of that, there's 45 Irish medium preschools in the north who will lose the critical advisory and training services that they've had up to now. Have the department any plans to respond to that particular crisis?
As a matter that we're currently looking at in the context that there's been an organisation appointed to provide all these services on a north-south cross-border basis. Having said that, we are very focused on the services that we receive from Altram. We recognise very clearly the importance. I understand that the organisation that's been appointed isn't active in preschool at the moment, so that would be an immediate cause for concern with us. So this is a matter which that the Minister needs to look at, and that's in train.
Okay. Just one more, Chair. Our nursery principals are in the position where they can't get any principal release, and I think when you visit nursery schools, you see what pressurised environment it is as well. Are there any plans to have a little bit of equality for nursery principals as well?
It's a matter that the department has been looking at for some time. It actually falls to colleagues in the department to look at that. But as far as I'm aware, there are no plans to introduce it at the moment. But
when it might be your department, I would appreciate if you bring the concerns of the nursery principals back to the department.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Donny?
I went last week to meet with early years regarding the Bright Start, which I know is OFM, DFM, but the Childcare Partnership deliver Sure Start, which is your department's programme, and Bright OFM. Are we looking at synergies and how they can work together, how we can get it all pulling together in the same ways? are matters being properly linked and the concerns of the private sector being, I think, sort of left out a bit were the major problem?
In principle, yes. The proposals in Bright Start around private childcare provision are the responsibility of DHS SPS, so it's not something that we would be directly responsible for involved. In Bright Start, we do have an interest also in relation to the use of the school's estate. That's something that we'll be looking at very carefully to see how that works. The significance of Bright Start and what it's planning to do is also something that, when we're doing the Sure Start review, we will need to look at specifically, and indeed in relation to that, we're planning to involve colleagues from health on the project board, so that they will be involved in overseeing the work jointly with us as we go forward, to make sure that we do take each other's concerns into account.
So there was a request and the responses for an Educare strategy. Is that sort of within that health link?
Well, the Educare strategy takes us back really to the debate that was going on for some years around the early years strategy, and which is still continuing, and rightly so. Clearly, when you deal with small children, and the smaller they are, the more important the care aspect becomes in relation to looking after them. And although we have published a document which is essentially around learning, we do recognise that children learn in all kinds of ways, and are seeking to engage with other colleagues and other departments around that. So a matter on the Educare strategy as such would be something for the executive, I think, to decide whether it wanted to bring that forward or not.
A couple of things, and I welcome if I had the breezes with you in terms of the spectre, because obviously I think an ongoing issue has always been, and I think, and I speak personally here, that given the considerable investment that we put in terms of early years, considering the importance that we place on early years, are we confident that that focus has been given us the outcomes that we believe are essential? And I don't mean outcomes that, when they leave preschool and go into primary school, that they can, do the 11 plus. And there's no intentions of bringing it forward to, from preschool to primary school. But when I read, for example, the most recent piece of work done by the inspector in terms of the evaluation into early years specialists, and that just came out there a few weeks ago, it was certainly caveated considerably by a lot of phrases in the ETI report. The more effective methods need to be employed. And then it made this comment, which it was in terms of the current DE guidance document, the role of the qualified teacher and early year specialist needs to be reviewed and updated as a matter of urgency in line with the findings within the report. In particular, needs to reflect the minimum qualifications for preschool leaders is sessional care set out in the 2012 HSCT minimum standards. How are we going to have that implemented in a way that gives confidence to everybody across the piece, in primary, statutory, voluntary, community, that we're all doing the same thing to the best of our ability?
We're obviously looking at the report at the moment, because it is a matter of some concern to us, and it's a matter of considerable concern to us, because in the voluntary and community sector we do set a high store on the availability, the accessibility and the role of the early years specialist, and as part of our Raising Standards agenda, we want to drive that up. So we need to look at the report to see where things have dropped by the wayside, where the process or the intention was there and is there, but has somehow just drifted a bit off course. There may also be a need for us to introduce some new arrangements around the role of early years specialists. Ultimately, the outcome, if you like, is assessed through the ETI inspection, but we're all aware that there's an inspection cycle, and it may not pick up things immediately. Breach, do you want to talk a little bit about early years?
Yes, okay. I think if we look at the sort of reason why we did have an earlier specialist in the voluntary and private sector, at the time when it's now the preschool programme, but back in the days when we came on board it was the expansion programme. And at that time the earlier specialist was brought on board to make up the deficit of being a non-teacher organisation. They were to replace the teacher element and go in and work alongside staff to raise standards. And for a long time that has worked really, really well. But as the programme has developed and leaders and staff within the voluntary sector and private sector have improved their own qualifications and have risen standards within their own setting, we have seen a shift and a need for a shift in terms of that role. Very quickly, it was the teachers and early years specialist, but very quickly it just became early years specialist because teachers couldn't come out of their statutory setting to provide that support. What has happened is a lot of the leaders now are holding a degree, the early years degree, and they themselves now can become their own early years specialist. Many of them have chosen not to take on that role because they do value that outside evaluation coming in and the dissemination of good practice, etc. But in recent years we have also realised that there is a need to improve or raise the standard in terms of what a leader must hold in line of qualifications and what skills and aptitudes they need. And to that end, in the new standards from 2016, leaders are going to have to hold a level 5 qualification. So that means now that the role of the early years specialist, it's timely that it needs to be developed. Many of those people are holding a level 4 qualification, so there's a need to have a shift in that as well. And their role in supporting the staff is becoming a slightly different role in terms of helping them to disseminate, to gather clusters, to bring information, etc. So we just need to revisit the document and see what we do need the early years specialists to be providing for those groups.
Do you see any issue or concern that's also raised in the report in relation to the proportion of early years specialist support being provided by the early years organisation has decreased from, according to the report, from over 85% of those setting those inspected in 10-11 to 54% of those inspected in 12-13?
Well, the reason for that has because a number of settings, number one, have become their own early years specialist, or number two, there has been a rise in the number of independent early years specialists, and that has accounted for that decrease.
At a cost, obviously, if they're independent, because somebody obviously is footing the bill, which is obviously coming from the department via the budget that's given. Would that be right?
Well, within, Linda, I think I'm right in saying, within the funding that each group receives, they allocate an amount to their early years specialist.
It is, and that's another thing that we need to be looking at this.
Yes, because this whole issue, and obviously the BSc report obviously highlighted, the BSc obviously highlighted a raft of issues, and Sean has made reference to some of them. And one of them that was raised as well was, are the preschool places still being double funded by the PEPs and EYF? Has that issue been, because, and there's going to be a huge issue, let's be very honest, the budgets are in serious crisis, and the Minister's having meetings about his budgets. The Finance Minister is making it very clear budgets are under real strain and stress. So we need to make sure that we are not double funding any organisation, whether it be in preschool, primary school or post-primary, and that we know exactly where we can follow the trail in terms, because we're all inventive, and schools become very inventive and organisations become very inventive in their ways in which they can. But Linda, how do we address that particular issue to ensure that there is a degree of equity and fairness right across the piece?
that's one of the Minister's key considerations, I think, in looking at how we take the fund forward. We absolutely want to be sure that no one is, the funding is going as far as it possibly can, and that nobody's getting sort of anything over and above anyone else. There's slight concern just around the groups that are currently being funded would be to ensure there was a transitional arrangement in place, because we all know the difficulty of managing the preschool programme and of finding places, and we certainly don't want to destabilise that or undo any of the work that we have done in the past couple of years. But having said that, this is something we need to look at, and we need to look at groups transiting out of that as quickly as possible. I think we will always need a bit of flexibility, because there are groups with very small numbers, and that indeed was the thinking behind the fund originally. There will be groups that aren't quite economic, but that are of strategic importance. They're in rural areas or they're in small communities, and we need those settings. So there may be a need for a little bit of flexibility there, but certainly, as I say, we need to be looking at that very hard. You're absolutely right. The other thing in relation to the early years specialists, yes, the department's not in the business of setting up an industry here where people act as consultants rather than as essentially advisors. So we certainly need to get on top of that as a matter of priority too.
So, finally, in terms of the timescale for the Minister's consideration of the future of the Early Years Fund, have we any, obviously we've abandoned an early years policy. I think that's sort of disappeared a long time ago. It's a bit like ESA, it's sort of a thing of the past. And I noticed in the report there's reference to the fact that when ESA would come into existence, all these things would be sorted, but we'll not go there. We're going there next week. But in terms of, is the early years strategy now become learning to learn? And are we sure that's the course and direction? And aligned to that, we have obviously the future of the Early Years Fund. Is that the sort of the twin track approach that now is being taken to replace an early years policy?
I think I wouldn't see it just as a twin track approach, because yes, it is an early learning strategy. It does focus on a number of educational issues, but it is also, as the Minister has said, an outward-looking strategy. There's a lot of work going on around early intervention and sort of work with the early years that DE is certainly involved in, and that we would have an interest in looking for opportunities to ensure that what comes out of that feeds in to learning to learn, because, as I said, the younger the child, the less clear the line between what is learning and what is care, and the department recognises that. I think in reshaping the Early Years Fund, the Minister will want to look at the broader priorities of the department and also the aspirations around learning to learn, which is promoting early learning.
And have we any timescale as to when you think that we may have something coming in relation to that?
I couldn't really say. The Minister is currently considering options. He's looking at plans at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Rach, Linda, Cathy, Alison. Alison, you got it easy this time. There'll probably be questions for you the next time. Thanks for your information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, moving on. We'll move on then to just to follow on from this presentation. Is there anything else that we need to? There's really not. All we have to do is wait to see what the motion will be in relation to the fund. I don't think there's anything else that we really need to be doing as far as us is concerned. No. Okay. Thank you. Correspondence. You'll find page 269 to 317. You have 9 items provided under correspondence. Just a few, just run quickly through. At page 278, draw your attention to the active citizenship and youth volunteering event that I'm sponsoring in the Senate Chamber on Friday the 8th. I would encourage members to attend. Oh, that's Friday the 8th of April. I'm glad that's down there. I'm glad that's my diary. I hope that's in my diary. Okay. 287, you'll see a response from the Department on the development of terms of reference of the expert group, which is considering the long-term future of GCSEs and A-levels, and I would suggest that we write to the Department and seek the terms of reference when they're available. At 290, you'll see a response from the Department following the briefing from the officials on the OECD report. And I would suggest that we include this correspondence in the report to our inquiry and to the Education and Training Inspector. And members will also recall that the Department gave a very unsatisfactory oral briefing on this subject previously. And I really don't believe that the Department has made anything like a serious effort to answer the questions that we asked. Even in response to the question about the unregulated transfer tests, the Department has said almost nothing about an issue which is at the centre of an element of the Department's policy. So I would suggest that we would write to the Department again and ask them to brief us on the subject. Danny?
In the letter back, in the line, in the first paragraph, it says the OECD report without first engaging extensively with the wider education system. Can we ask what that includes?
I think, Chair, when we attended the briefing session back in January, they indicated at that time there would be some kind of consultation, but yes, write the letter.
I'm thinking more of the parents. I can see it talking to teachers and governors and all of that, but will they actually find someone who actually speak to the public?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, page 303, you'll see correspondence from the Department following the briefing from officials on the findings and the next steps of the PISA 2012. You'll also recall again that the Department gave an unsatisfactory oral briefing on the subject. Response before us indicates, surprisingly, that the Department believes that the performance of pupils in subject areas is not related to the curriculum. There's a bit of blue sky thinking. This also responds. This response refers to guidance issued in 2011 on the classroom observation, which the Department indicated had been misunderstood by schools. Yet the Department sets out no plans to rectify this particular issue. So the response also includes some useful information in that the Department is reviewing the fit between the PISA tests and our curriculum. Capital projects are being rolled out to tackle school bullying problems, or even school building problems, and a Wi-Fi rollout is also underway which will address IT deficiencies in schools. So I would suggest that in this case we write back to the Department and ask them to do something to address the classroom observation problem identified by the PISA 2012, and also suggest that we don't seek any further oral briefings on the subject. Sean?
Thank you, Chair. It's page 290, the OECD report and evaluation and assessment frameworks. In the second last paragraph, it talks particularly given Department would exercise caution over any measures that places commercial tests at the centre of assessment policy, given the OECD's concerns around their fit with our curriculum. But in the last paragraph it says then if the committee has any further, if a briefing would be useful, I think it certainly would be useful in terms of where we're going with assessment for learning.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask for that, yes?
Yeah, agree with that.
Agreed, thank you. Tabled items, papers you'll see an invitation to meet with Adam Beck, Director of Campus Planning and Development at the University of Massachusetts, tomorrow at 2 p.m. in room 29. It would be helpful if members could indicate to staff if they wish to attend. Unfortunately, I will not be available.
Well, I can't do that.
I think it relates to joined-up government issues. It's not particularly related to education. But
Okay, and just agree that we would dispose of the correspondence as per the covering sheet. Trevor, just before we do that.
Well, on the, the correspondence, Chairman, there's a correspondence there about home-to-school transport in St Patrick's Grammar. Can I take it that correspondence is at an end?
I think
Peter?
the Chair, I'd suggest that the members note that unless they do want to do something more in the subject.
Absolutely not. I think we should terminate it.
Okay.
And then the other thing is on the tabled items, Chairman.
Thank you, yes. Danny?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to highlight that 317 was this Society of Biology survey, which I just thought was intriguing and passed on. I just thought we'd try and keep pushing that in STEM to actually get the understandable side of science so that people understand genetically modified crops. And there's various things in there that I just think there's the whole world doesn't understand. They need to get it into the schools. Thank you.
Do we forward that to the Department?
Thank you.
Okay. Trevor?
The tabled, additional tabled items is one there from NICE, Chairman. Could we perhaps look at that next week at time?
Okay.
Because what we have here, apart from anything else, the various charts and so on are not in colour.
Yes.
It's quite hard to differentiate.
Okay. Put that in the programme for next week.
Could we get it in colour?
Yes, the common
Could
colour.
we just received it at very short
I know
notice.
you did.
But we will put into matters arising next week then.
It'll be on the electronic
On
system.
the electronic
so
system, yes.
You'll be able to see it.
Yep. You'll really see it in high definition, even. Okay, the draft forward work programme, page 319 to 322. Just to remind members that the Minister will brief the committee next week on the education bill and the common funding formula scheme. The clerk has asked us to advise a few issues in the forward work programme. Next week, the committee will hear, as we've said, from the Minister and consider a paper on the way forward of our scrutiny of the STEM issues.
Yes, Chair. And also, as the committee had discussed earlier about area planning, and all that's really nice things, beautifully arranged, not going to happen now. I would suggest that that it would be difficult to make any firm plans about area planning until the primary area plans are produced. I had planned, Chair, to have a draft ETI inquiry report in PAX this Friday, but I'm only on recommendation 1 now, so this is unlikely. But what I would really like to do is to table a draft for members' information on the 9th of April and for formal consideration to happen after Easter. The reason is that if the committee was happy, I could then share that with the department and they could do the factual accuracy bit over Easter, so we could use that time well. So if that's okay with members, that's what we would do. I'd also suggest that we might defer consideration of the terms of reference of our next inquiry until maybe the second week after Easter. And finally, there are just a number of events and visits coming up. Just want to make sure that they're in members' diaries. Holy Family Choir on Tuesday, which Chair told us about. The EU British Council event, which is Tuesday 27th May at lunchtime. We're going to Greenmount Agricultural Centre in Antrim on Wednesday 28th of May. Okay. And then Wednesday 18th of June for Fermanagh Trust. Now, members had said, could we also visit St Aidan's in Derrylin and St Mary's in Brollah? I should know my geography, and I didn't, but they're at the opposite ends of Fermanagh. So if members want to think about that, choose one, or maybe we might invite them to come to Enniskillen or something to talk to members.
I think we need to give a wee bit of thought as to just the practicalities of how we operate that, because you're 2 ends of the county. And
where is our meeting with the Fermanagh Trust going to take place?
Enniskillen.
Their headquarters is just beside the...
I would say straight away it would be very instructive for members to drive from Enniskillen to Brollah, and they might understand what the problem is. You think you're there, and then an hour later you're not. But that's the crux of it, really. It's the journey, you know.
And a few of us have been to Derrylin, I think.
I haven't been to Derrylin. I've been to Brollah.
Yeah.
Most westerly school in Northern Ireland.
It's the only place in Northern Ireland where you can start off in Lisburn and drive 100 miles and still not have crossed the border.
So I think we just need to give just the practical issues in relation to how we address that. So we'll come back with some more. Okay, are members content with the draft work programme as set out by Peter? Great. Okay, thank you for your time. Any other business? Yes, we're going to do this, but we'll do it in closed session.
All right,
yes, okay. So if members are content, we'll bring this to an end and then deal with the item in closed business. Thank you.
Closed session then.